Make your garden a haven for pollinators. Ben Sellew with Pride's Corner will show you how to attract all kinds of pollinators from birds, bees, and other beneficial insects.
Today, my goal is to go over a lot of the facts out there, the challenge that pollinators are facing every day, and how we, as the average homeowner, can make it easier for them. Reproduce and live happily. So American Beauties is a really interesting program. Since its inception 10 years ago, we've given over $500,000 to the National Wildlife Federation. Every plant we sell, we donate a quarter to the National Wildlife Federation. So we're proud of being able to give back. So what does a pollinator have to do to get noticed around here? That's one of our sales reps. That's when we go and display at these industry shows, we tend to dress our salespeople up as pollinators and try to have fun with it. So some of the stuff here, we're going to start off at almost a low point, but then we're going to bring it back up. The fact of the matter is bees, butterflies are disappearing at a pretty alarming rate. Almost 90% less monarchs this year than there were in the 1970s. 90%. The good thing is that it has gotten national media attention now. People it's a buzzword in our industry. People are paying attention, people are asking for natives, people are asking for what kind of chemicals are you using on your plants, and the awareness is out there. This is a fantastic article that I recommend everybody read. The Year the Monarch Didn't Appear. Sunday Review. Cover story of the New York Times last year, A World Without Bees. And I'm going to hopefully show you a little glimpse of what it might look like if you walked into Whole Foods down the road without bees. And it's pretty staggering. So we covered this, 90%, down 90% from the bees. And we'll go over why. There's some key reasons why the monarchs are down so much. And in 2013, I don't know if anybody caught this, but that was when we had the severe colony collapse disorder. That was when the honeybees were going through such a difficult time. About probably 60% of the produce that you buy is specifically relying on honeybees for fruit production. Almonds is one of the key ones. 100% relying on honeybees. So here's a map of the U.S. showing big concentrations of specific crops grown in the states. And if you see here, the numbers are staggering, the stats are staggering. How many crops that are just reliant on these pollinators? So why is this decline happening? Let's look at honeybees first. Insecticide use. That's a big issue. Predatory mites. You can see here, I know it's a little gross, but that's mites actually crawling on a bee. And fungal attacks. So one of the things is there's a lack of native pollen sources out there. These hydrangeas and roses and all these great, beautiful landscape plants, they're bred for disease resistance, for flower blooms, for color, but not for pollen production. So what looks like this loaded flower with food for a pollinator really might not be the case, because aesthetics has really become the number one gardening goal. People want it to look good. They're not focused on the health of the ecosystem. So now let's go into butterflies. So the key difference between butterflies and bees. Bees feed on pollen and nectar. Butterflies and larvae feed on the leaves of plants. So if you're walking around your backyard and you see a couple holes in some leaves, you're doing a good job. So one of the key things that is harming these monarchs on their great migration is the Midwest used to be loaded with milkweed, Asclepias, which is their main food source. You know, for butterflies. Yeah. So Asclepias, it's, you know, if you ever rip a leaf, you get that waxy white substance. The butterflies have evolved to digest that. And that's one of the key takeaways I want you guys to walk away from today from, is that over the course of 1 million years, our native insects have evolved. Every plant out there has a defense mechanism so that they don't get eaten. That's their goal. But our native insects have co-evolved with these plants so that they can digest and metabolize those plant defense mechanisms that they're listing off. So our butterflies can eat that, but they cannot eat a Japanese maple. They cannot eat a calorie pear. And we'll go into more detail on that later, but that's one of the key reasons why these pollinators are struggling. It's because they have not co-evolved with all these introductions from Asia and Europe, and they provide zero food for our native insects in New England. So massive loss of milkweed. If you go to the Midwest now, it's all field production, corn, soybeans. Then it would be milkweed for the monarch migration. So let's talk about the suburban desert. If you go to a Toll Brothers development right now, and nothing against Toll Brothers, they're beautiful homes, beautiful neighborhoods, but you will see lawn, you will see pine, you will see just basically, it's a food desert to the pollinators. Lawns, although they're great to hang around in, have people over, have a barbecue, they are probably the least environmentally friendly plant. They sequester less carbon than any tree or shrub. They provide zero food source. So lawns might as well be pavement to the pollinator. What can we do to help? It starts off with looking to plant more native gardens, more echinacea, more native grasses, oaks, clefra. I mean, look at here. This is the typical traditional design front yard. Here's what a native plant garden would look like in the front of the house. That looks beautiful to me. Less uses of insecticides is key, too, because the colony collapse disorder is basically occurring because these bees who are going to a pollen source, and if there's any chemical residue from insecticide use, that is totally messing with their whole physiology. Lawns are great. We love to have barbecues, hang out in the summer, but use them more as corridors to wildflowers and different gardens. Here's a couple pictures of some great native plant garden ideas. And it's funny, if you go to England and you go to some of their formal gardens that they have in arboretums, you'll see Echinacea, you'll see Panicum shenandoah, you'll see our native plants in North America. And then our formal gardens have their native plants. So if we can, but what I want you guys to walk away from today is that it's not, you don't have to move 100% to natives. It's a healthy balance. We all want to grow a beautiful hydrangea and have that cool, unique Japanese maple. But instead of planting that extra pear this year, plant an oak. Instead of planting the miscanthus, plant carex or panicum. So it's not a whole pendulum swing, but it's just a little bit counts. And American Beauties is going to be your source to really identify native plants that are treated without chemicals at the garden center. we have a big, nice tag, and we'll go over kind of how to find our American Beauties plants. All of them are great nectar source for pollinators. They're neonicotinoid free. And you'll see here on these lists, neonicotinoid is a pretty harmful chemical being used in some production. But you can be confident that all the plants on these lists here are free of that. We use biocontrols, which are like parasitic wasps and ladybugs to combat pests on our native plants. And our nursery has joined this global MPS certification. So we're the first nursery, Pride's Corner, in the United States to enroll in this program. And basically right now in Europe, if you want to sell to a retailer, you have to have this certification. And they measure three things: your recycling, your resource use, and your chemical use. And we have people coming to our nursery every month, tracking numbers, keeping data, because we're making a huge initiative to be more sustainable. Right now, if you were to go to our shipping pad, we have solar panels on the top of them, and it provides about 40% of the electricity for our entire nursery. So here's some more native plant garden ideas. And one thing I'd love to add about Weston Nurseries is that they have totally, since the inception of this brand, American Beauties, they have carried it. They have helped us spread the message and have been an early adopter of the benefits of native plants. So you guys are in the right place. So, like I said, this is like such a key point. I wish I could, if you were to walk away with one thing from this talk today, it would have to do with the coevolution of our native insects and native plants. And it translates, it's not just the insects. Guess what eats the insects? The songbirds. They don't just eat seeds. They need that vital protein, larvae and bugs. So native plants is food for our birds and bees and insects. And there's also, I think, psychological benefits. When you're walking through here, I'm sure your cortisol and stress levels are way down when you hear the birds and the butterflies flying around. Some more native plant garden ideas. So now we'll get into some specific plants that are just excellent food sources. Oak. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of Doug Tallamy, but he's a professor out of University of Delaware, and he is a renowned conservationist and ecologist. And look him up. I recommend you look him up. He has some really compelling messages. I watched him give a lecture where he did what he called the 12 by 12 experiment. He went into his backyard and made a 12 by 12 block, okay? And in feet, just 12 by 12 feet, right? Nice and small, easy. He planted an oak tree there. On another 12 by 12 plot, he planted a Bradford pear. The data was staggering. Over the course of 4 different times where he went to check on that oak, he found about 250 caterpillars and 50 different species within of those 250 caterpillars. In that same 12 by 12 plot where the pear was, there was 2 caterpillars. 2. And that all goes back to the coevolution of what our native insects and birds can eat and what they can't. So oak is a great one. And people always say oak is too slow to grow. I won't be able to enjoy my big oak tree because it's going to take 100 years. That's not true. Sugar maple. You still get that beautiful, deciduous, fall color interest, and loaded with food for the pollinators. And all these plants we're going over today will be in an American Beauty's native plant pot. Eastern white pine, Pinus strobus. Really popular tree right now. Really popular tree. And what's nice to see is from the really commercial end of it is when we work with Weston Nurseries Wholesale on some big lists that they get for landscape customers that are really transforming the landscape in Hopkinton. We're starting to see more natives on those lists. So those large-scale planters and plantings are starting to catch on to this trend. River birch, Betula nigra heritage. And you'll see some cultivars within natives, which we call nativars. And those are just as beneficial and just as native as just Betula nigra, just an improved variety from a production standpoint. Blueberries, vaccinium, something great to enjoy in your backyard, food for the birds. It's okay if they eat your blueberries, guys. Red twig dogwood. Great plant. You get that winter interest with the red stems and then beautiful flowers. Cephalanthus, not the prettiest plant button bush, but this is full of nectar and one of the most food-rich sources for our native insects. Eastern redbud. You guys have seen these all over the place. One of my favorite trees. Early flower. Right now they're loaded with pink flowers. And one of the first to come into color every year. So that's where you get, hey, not only a native benefit, but a real nice aesthetic looking tree. Clethra. Clethra omnifolia. Another great native deciduous shrub to New England. And we can't forget Asclepias. Another great flowering perennial, native, loaded with food for our butterflies. I'll promise you, if you plant a little plot of 6 or 7 Asclepias in your backyard, you will see monarchs this year. Tuberosa. Another species. This is just loaded with food. Beautiful orange flowers. Am I going a little too fast here, guys?
Just a little.
A little, sorry. I'm diligently writing down notes. That's great. Aster. Aquilegia, another really early flowering perennial. Penstemon, another native perennial. If anybody has any specific questions on the growth habits or the plants here, please feel free to ask. Echinacea, one of my favorite native perennials. You get that color and just loaded with food. Spotted geranium, so Geranium maculatum. Mountain mint, this is a funky one, but we like growing all the funky varieties at Pride's Corner. Monarda, bee balm, this is just like a color bomb in July, loaded with flowers. It's like you can't even see the foliage, it's all color. Rudbeckia, another key one. Phlox divaricata, garden phlox. And before we keep going on some of these varieties, east of the Mississippi River, about 85% of the land is privately owned. So this whole pollinator, Save the Pollinator movement is not going to happen on public land, guys. It's going to happen in our backyards. Solidago, I'm sure you guys have seen this if you've ever drove by a wildflower field. Goldenrod is the common name. Phlox paniculata, upright, full of color, summer flowering. Herbs. Herbs are a great food source, so it might be a little annoying when you're trying to go harvest some basil to make some pesto, but you're feeding your native insects. So I recommend all of you guys to visit abnativeplants.com. That's the website for our native plant program. There's tons of information, tons of find your local garden center that carries it, design plans, and just really inspiring, motivating messages about how beneficial native plants really are. So when you walk out to the Weston Nurseries perennial yard, this is where you'll see our tag, American Beauties. All sorts of information on the characteristics of the plant, hardiness, whether it likes sun or shade. And then on the back, we always like to include a little cartoon of what specific little critter you're helping out when you plant that plant. So this is the retail package right here. Dressing up the native plants. So, I hope I inspired you to help promote the Save the Pollinators movement, and that's all I got for you guys today.
Today we learned how to save pollinators 1 yard at a time. This is your challenge. Great information, Ben. This is Deb Moore for How Does Your Garden Grow at HCAT TV.